The secret meaning of song. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Every word written in Scripture carries a weight of eternity, but how often do we read the Psalms and simply skim the surface? The Psalms are not just songs, they are a divine blueprint, a reflection of the human experience, and a revelation of God's heart and mind. David, the psalmist, wasn't just a shepherd or a king. He was a man who understood the essence of worship, purpose, and identity. He didn't merely write poetry, he documented a heavenly conversation, exposing the mysteries of faith, the struggles of humanity, and the promises of God's kingdom. Tonight, we're not here to read the Psalms like a devotional. No, we're here to uncover the secret meaning, to explore the wisdom hidden between the lines, the principles of God that can transform your life. The Psalms are more than expressions of worship. They are declarations of purpose and power, strategies for victory, and keys to unlock your destiny. As we dive deep into the secret meaning of the Psalms, I want you to ask yourself, what is God saying to me about my own life, my potential, my purpose? Because hidden in these verses are treasures meant not just for David's generation, but for ours. Let's discover them together and align our lives with the heart of the King. Every word written in Scripture carries a weight of eternity. But how often do we read the Psalms and simply skim the surface? The Psalms are not just songs, they are a divine blueprint, a reflection of the human experience, and a revelation of God's heart and mind. David, the psalmist, wasn't just a shepherd or a king. He was a man who understood the essence of worship, purpose, and identity. He didn't merely write poetry, he documented a heavenly conversation, exposing the mysteries of faith, the struggles of humanity, and the promises of God's kingdom. The Psalms carry layers of meaning. On the surface, they seem like heartfelt expressions of praise, lamentation, and thanksgiving. Yet beneath this is a treasure trove of wisdom and insight meant to guide us in every season of life. These sacred verses are infused with principles that reveal the nature of God and our purpose in His plan. David's words teach us not only how to communicate with God, but also how to understand His ways. Consider Psalm 23, one of the most well-known passages in the Bible. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. At first glance, it speaks of God's provision and guidance. But if we dig deeper, it's a declaration of trust, a roadmap for understanding divine leadership in the face of uncertainty. It tells us that God doesn't merely lead us, He walks with us. In those quiet moments by still waters, He restores not just our physical needs, but our very souls. The Psalms are also filled with kingdom principles. David often speaks of God as king, a theme that echoes throughout Scripture. This isn't a metaphor meant to be taken lightly. When David refers to God as king, he is proclaiming the authority, power, and governance of heaven over earth. For example, Psalm 47 declares, "For God is the King of all the earth, sing praises with understanding." This is not just a call to worship, it's a reminder that our praise is rooted in the recognition of God's ultimate sovereignty. The Psalms also reveal the intimate relationship between humanity and God. In passages like Psalm 139, David says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." This speaks to a God who isn't distant but deeply personal. He knows our thoughts, our fears, and our desires. This intimate knowledge is not to condemn us, but to remind us that we are fully known and still deeply loved. Such verses challenge us to live authentically before God, understanding that nothing about us is hidden from His sight. Another layer of the Psalms reveals the principles of emotional honesty before God. David's prayers often begin with despair, but end in hope. He doesn't shy away from expressing his fears, frustrations, or doubts. Psalm 13 begins with the words, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever?" Yet by the end of the same psalm, David proclaims, "I will sing to the Lord because He has dealt bountifully with me." This pattern teaches us that faith doesn't deny our emotions, it transforms them. The Psalms give us permission to bring our rawest feelings to God, trusting that He will meet us there. The Psalms are also prophetic. They point beyond David's life to the coming of the Messiah. Psalm 22, for instance, is a vivid portrayal of Christ's suffering on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me?" These words spoken by Jesus himself were written centuries earlier by David. This shows us that the Psalms are not just historical or poetic. They are divinely inspired revelations that connect the Old Testament with the New, grounding us in the eternal purposes of God. Psalm 1 sets the tone for the entire book, emphasizing the contrast between the righteous and the wicked. Blessed is a man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. Here the psalmist is not merely offering advice, but laying out a principle for living a life aligned with God's will. It reminds us that our choices determine our destiny, and that delighting in the law of the Lord leads to a fruitful and prosperous life. Throughout the Psalms, we find a recurring theme of the power of praise. David understood that praise is not just an act of worship, it is a weapon of spiritual warfare. In Psalm 34, he declares, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. This isn't just a personal resolution, but a principle that shifts atmospheres. Praise invites God's presence into our circumstances and changes the way we see our challenges. It reminds us of who God is and realigns our perspective with his greatness. The Psalms also teach us about the seasons of life. Ecclesiastes may famously say there is a time for everything, but the Psalms show us how to navigate those times with faith. Whether in the valley of the shadow of death or on the mountaintop of victory, the Psalms provide language for every season. They teach us that every moment of life, joyful or painful, can be brought before God. Another secret hidden in the Psalms is the principle of remembrance. David often reflects on God's past faithfulness as a source of strength for present challenges. In Psalm 77, he says, I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. This act of remembering is not just nostalgia, it is a deliberate choice to focus on God's unchanging character. It teaches us that when we face uncertainty, we can find confidence in the God who has never failed us. The Psalms also challenge us to embrace a kingdom mindset. They remind us that our lives are part of a greater narrative. In Psalm 8, David marvels, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? This is not a question of doubt, but of wonder. It reveals that our value is rooted in God's intentional design and purpose for us. Such verses encourage us to live with the awareness that we are stewards of God's creation, called to reflect his glory on earth. The Psalms are filled with imagery of nature, reminding us of God's creative power and his ability to sustain all things. From the heavens declaring the glory of God in Psalm 19 to the rivers clapping their hands in Psalm 98, these verses invite us to see God's hand in the world around us. They teach us that worship isn't confined to words or music, but can be expressed through our appreciation of God's creation. Finally, the Psalms offer a vision of hope. They remind us that no matter how dark our circumstances may seem, God's light always prevails. Psalm 30 declares, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. This promise is not just a poetic sentiment, but a declaration of God's faithfulness to bring renewal and restoration. It encourages us to hold on to hope, knowing that God's purposes for us are good. Each psalm is a testament to the multifaceted nature of God and his relationship with humanity. They are more than poetic expressions. They are a guide for living a life rooted in faith, purpose, and the principles of the kingdom. Hidden within their verses are treasures meant to transform not just our understanding, but our very lives.